Good afternoon, all my heathen friends. We are here this afternoon to meet with Aldo. Aldo, welcome to our little corner of the internet. It's great to meet you. We've met one another, once on John Richard's channel, and today it's all about you. We're going to talk about atheism and how you got to where you are. So, yes, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you again. I'm glad to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So let's jump right into it, Aldo. Tell us a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in a religious environment, and what was that like for you?
Well, my parents are Cuban immigrants. I live in Chicago. I've been here in the U.S. My first 3 years were in Cuba. I was born in the U.S. My parents had recently immigrated and couldn't support me. So I was sent back to Cuba like at 2 days old to live with my paternal grandmother until I was 3. And then both of us came to the U.S. to Chicago, where my parents had settled. And so when I grew up, being like Roman Catholics, I'd be taken to church every Sunday. Yes, I'd be taken to church every Sunday, and there was something we do, and listen to what the priest say. Now I had a little bit. Well, I won't say a little bit. I had a lot of ADHD back then, so I'm not really paying attention. I could listen for a couple of minutes, and then I'm off in something else. And it seemed like I just acquired this feeling. There's like an hour every Sunday morning that'll be lost to me forever. That
It's true. I think that's the slow killer. It's the slow killer. It's all the time that in your life that you spent on religion that you will never ever get back. It's crazy.
And so I'm thinking, well, this is just a ritual, what we do. But every once in a while, I would hear what the priest was saying, or I could understand, because that's what he's doing. He's explaining. He's reading a scripture, and then he's explaining what it means. So I recall, because coming home from church one day, I'm sitting in the back of the car, and I said something like, "Did you hear what the priest said today? Do you think somebody can walk on water, really?" Something like that. It was some miracle. And my mom, who would say things, I asked her, well, how do babies come? And the answer would be, well, mom and dad hug each other a lot, and then we pray, for a baby. And I said, that's it? You just, So how could there be unwanted babies if you got to pray for one, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't understand, it. So she says, yeah. So I turned to my dad, and who's a doctor. He's sort of like, if there's something about science, he's the guy I ask, And my mom tells me, if I have I recall having math homework that I didn't understand, I asked my mom, who's a teacher. That's the person I would go to. And she says, I don't understand this. Ask your dad, because he had more of that sort of math mind, scientific mind. So I asked my dad, Dad, can somebody walk on water? Now I know, because I heard her on the phone talking to somebody, that my mom can lie. And I had it very clear that lying just isn't a good thing, that regardless that it can be convenient, but it isn't a good thing. Even as a small child, it just isn't a good thing to do. Because then you have to remember the lie, and who you told the lie to. It just got way too complicated.
Lots of admin.
So yeah, that's one way of putting it. But I knew my mom could do it, so I asked my dad, and he doesn't answer. And so and I know my dad. I know the look he put on his face, like he's caught between a rock and a hard place, because he's got my mom right next to him. He can't say no, that's true, but he can't answer me like honestly, or I mean, I don't even know his thoughts on it, because he could have said it if he was a true believer. But my mom was reading, and my dad's met the Pope. Yeah. But because, well, he was just sort of into that. He got really involved with the church. Right. And so the church officials here in Chicago, he was going to go to Italy, to Rome. And he says, oh, they got him some introduction so he could meet the Pope. And I said, oh, what was it like? And he'd speak to different people in different languages, shake their hands and say something, bless them, and then off in his way, kind of thing. Kind of nice. But he doesn't answer. And I said, okay, there's something up to this, because Dad would have just said it if it were true. Now, what really broke it for me in terms of belief is, I don't know about other countries, but on Saturday mornings in the US, it would be dedicated to children. Television would be dedicated to television programming would be dedicated to children. And so you have cartoons on Saturday mornings. And I don't, since it's American, I know America exports a lot of its TV programming, because it's a lot cheaper for other countries to buy it than to produce their own. So have you heard of, Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote?
Yeah. We grew up with that shit as well.
Okay, you too.
Yeah.
So when I'm in church, see, my view was this, that I started making correlations between my Sunday morning and my Saturday morning, because Roadrunner would drop a boulder on Wile E. Coyote. But then in the next frame, Wile E. Coyote, he's flattened like a pancake, but in the next frame, he pops back up. It's sort of like crucifying somebody, and they pop back up. And that's the correlations I'm making, that my Sunday mornings are like my Saturday mornings, but the Saturday mornings are much more entertaining. Can't I stay home on Sunday to watch the cartoon? That was reading my 7-year-old mind was working that way.
Yeah, and, but why is it so boring? Eh? They always have this there's almost like a system that's built into religion that is meant to bore you, and it's like it's part of the system. I don't get it. Why can't they make it interesting? Why can't they make it entertaining? It's just, and it's repetitive, and especially in Catholicism.
In the Iron Age, it might have been entertaining.
Bend down, get up, bend down, Hail Mary. And it's repetitive and boring. Oh my goodness, I couldn't.
Dean,
especially as a young child.
Dean, if you were in the Iron Age and there were no newspapers, and even if there were newspapers, you couldn't read, and there's no TV, and there are those movies, you're just basically, you're pretty much living like a slave would in the last century. And that was just normal life back then. So anything would be, if I heard a story back then, put your mind back then, there's no TV, there's no internet, you are limited to the 2 miles around from where you were born. That is the extent of your world, 10 miles. And that's sort of in the Middle Ages, that you don't travel more than 10 miles from where you were born. So that's your whole universe, and all your entertainment comes from that universe. Then somebody comes telling you a story about seas splitting and all this kind of crap. It's like, that's fascinating. and people popping up after dead and the blind seeing. Oh, what? Who imagines that? That's great. That was TV for back then. That was entertainment. That was an interesting story. Because who believes that shit? Excuse me. I mean, back then, if I was in the irony, how could I not believe it? You know, what basis would I have not to believe it? So it was entertaining for them. The thing is, now we have a lot of alternatives. You know, like Shakespeare's written. You know, we got books. We got a bunch of alternatives to those kinds of stories. So it's boring now, but I could imagine if I didn't have other influences, it wouldn't be boring. It was the only thing I knew.
Yeah,
it was the only thing I knew.
So, what was describe for us the factors that led to the point where you actually made the decision to say, "Look, yeah, I'm out. This, there's no way that this is true." You know, what was that journey like for you? That journey of deconversion. Was it an instant? Was it like somebody switched on the light and you were an atheist, or was it more like everybody else's journey where it is like unpacking a bag and just letting go bit by bit by bit by bit until at the end of the road you realize the bag is empty?
No, it was. I mean, I don't think I really grasped it to begin with, because I'm going there and I'm listening to this, and why do I have to be here? But it was just something that I was being dragged to, by my parents, and the only part I liked was the host, going up there and getting the host. And it was also like an alert that, hey, it's almost over. And there's not much more to go now. But what really forced a thinking about it, not just this, I don't believe this, but what really forced was the confirmation. Don't you do the confirmation at like age 7 when you're really prepared to know?
yeah, that's what they call the age of reason, and then you are forced to dedicate your entire existence and your life, all time immemorial. It's crazy.
So what terrified me was having to get up in front of all these people and lie.
Yeah.
That created in me it created a problem.
Yeah.
And it made me focus, okay, really, why don't you believe in this? And my thinking always was, how come all these miracles happened back then? How come no miracles occur now? How come these people have the advantage of, oh, a friggin' miracle, a God must exist? How come I didn't get any of that?
Yeah.
You got Lake Michigan right out there. I could see Lake Michigan from my house. And I said, split that and I'm a believer. Split that and I got you. Okay? But you've given me nothing. You have given me nothing. So, I mean, I think the last miracle was that Lady of Fatima kind of thing.
Yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
But so I see the movie. And I said, no, that doesn't cut it. That's just her. That's just one crazy person. That isn't like a crowd of people saying, oh my God, he got off the cross, or I saw him walking down the street or something. No, that's just one kid. That isn't God. So, my 7-year-old mind, to resolve this problem, my 7-year-old mind was, if he did all these miracles back then he's a God. This is a religion for people back then, not for people now in the 20th century.
Exactly, exactly. You know, the thing is, I was speaking to another guy. His name is Andres. He was, and he compared it to, you know, that story that we are told as children about the emperor's new clothes, where where he says he felt like the kid. He felt like the kid saying the emperor is naked, but everybody around him is complimenting the emperor's beautiful clothes, and you know,
That's
it was
exactly,
just it was just like that. Yeah,
and that's where the control starts to come in. That you
yeah,
start denying your own mind, your own thinking, and adopt this group think that um, accepts
yeah,
the fallacy, if you will. And so then I was sort of liberated from that, aside from, of course, my parents. So I keep getting taken. And this continues till I'm about, say, 17 or so. And, I don't know how it came up um, with my mom, but what I do recall is that she'd taken me to a priest and says, Aldo's lost faith. So she says, well, okay, let me talk to him. And he brings me to his office. My mom's waiting outside, and we have a conversation. And then we come out, and the priest says to her, yeah, he's lost faith. And that was sort of it. He said, look, he doesn't believe. He's not going to believe. I don't work the miracles, so don't bring it to me as a for a solution.
they're going like, you gotta baptize that one again. Because you gotta baptize him again because the first time didn't take.
Yeah. And
That's so funny. That's so funny. So was this completely an inside job, or was there, for example, a person or somebody that sparked this way of thinking? Because from what you're telling me, it sounds like it was a complete inside job. You never drank the Kool-Aid. You never bought the bought the biscuits from the weird guy in the van.
right. Well, you need. Well, I was sort of fortunate. I guess I went to science was the alternative. I mean, there's gravity. There's I get in a bathtub and I'm not sitting on top of the water. I'm heavier than water. I mean, the explanation was given to me. The most basic science is physics, and that's all cause. And I mean, it is everything else grows from physics. So, and the most basic concept is cause and effect. The difference between humans and animals is that we ask why. Why did this happen? If it starts raining, an animal just thinks, well, it's raining, or I'll get out of the rain, or it's raining, that's it. We think, yeah, I'm getting wet, it's raining, but why is it raining? That's what makes humans like a superior animal. So I'm asking, well, why am I sinking and another guy can walk across water and not sink? I'm looking for the solutions. And people saying, well, Red Sea, there is a lot of salt in the water, and this, but as I learn more and more science, it becomes less and less feasible what they're saying in the book. It's like, well, how? Because I would ask, or how would that happen? How could what physically? What are the physics of Jesus walking on the water? What are the physics that this water is simply splitting because somebody desires it so, or wishes it so, or commands water molecules to separate? I can't conceive that an entity, that you can't see can have that impact on physical things, that I can touch, like the computer. So as time progressed, it just seemed more and more ridiculous. I guess that's the only way for me to put it. And as you go on and then I start to learn about other religions. Hey, a whole lot of people believe in.
There's some weird shit out there.
and then you start, they believe all kinds of things. And then you start wondering, well, why did they start to believe? And say, oh, because they didn't have knowledge. They didn't have really, because the church starts to change. That's another thing. If this is the word of God, how come we all had to eat fish on Friday until then all of a sudden the church says, no, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And I recall, well, wait a minute. God sent a message, or what changed? So when you start changing the dogma or the requirements, I think women had to go into church with their shoulders covered, or that something on their head. They put some kind of mask or doily on their on their head to enter the church, and then you didn't have to do it. And I said, when did God say you didn't have to do it if they had these rules?
It always struck me how God's will and what God wants, there seems to be a direct connection with what man wants and what man says, because all of a sudden you'll find that God changed his mind over XYZ. Then women weren't. Then women could come to church with uncovered hair. Next thing, God was okay with not eating fish on Friday. It's crazy how these things. You have to be outside of it to actually notice this, because when you are inside the religion, when you are believing it, it's there's no way that you're going to notice that. You have to step away from the tree before you can see that you are inside a forest. If you're standing right up against the tree, you only see the bark. You only see the bark of the tree. It's crazy how that works.
Well, there is something in the process. There is some denial of reality in the process, and I think that occurs earlier. And if you are accepting that like the whole resurrection thing, or if you're accepting the miracles, I don't need to be specific about the miracle. If you're accepting the miracles, you can accept anything.
Yeah.
You can, because if it's just, I can be at a job and they say, hey, you have to wear this hat. And I say, okay, and then we say, well, you know what? We changed the rule. You don't have to wear the hat. Okay. I don't care one way or another. But if you're telling me, hey, this is the word of God, and I said, well, I understand English. How come you didn't tell me this? Or how did you get it? If he had to give Moses these tablets, how come he didn't? Who did he send the note to humanity with about the head coverings?
Yeah,
so
it's true.
So I mean, the first and most important part of theism is removing your resistance to accept these miracles, this improbability, and not improbability. It's just impossible. I got involved in just a couple of years ago. Maybe I would be on Facebook, and usually I'm talking. I like history, so it'd be like a lot of history sites. But history is already happened, and you're just arguing with somebody who might know more about a specific era than you do, or you're talking with somebody who knows less. That's pretty much it, and you're exploring what interests you. But I found that boring, and I like debate, and so I'm thinking the two best things to debate are politics and religion. Let me go for religion, because for me, I felt, well, that's a sure win. for me.
Facebook is great for that, because you'll find all kinds there, from from Muhammad split the moon to baby Jesus helped me found my car keys to to the monkey god is blessing me with fortune. It's like you'll
Everything.
find all flavors on there. It's crazy how that works. So, are you involved in any kind of activism? And we have this romanticized idea when we talk about activism that we are some Greenpeace warriors chained to a gate, stopping people from entering a warehouse where they make chemicals. But activism can be as easy and as simple as just being a resistance. Saying like, look up to here and no further. And I think just having these conversations on a public platform and putting yourself out there, that's also
activism.
Activism.
And I feel even the debate groups are activism.
Yeah.
Though that's the extent that I take it, that I get into a atheist-theist debate group, and that's activism. But let me say I didn't have any illusions going in, that I don't think anybody goes into, or possibly some people do, but this was my thinking going in. If my mind isn't going to be changed, this is a debate, but my mind is not going to be changed. Thus, I don't have any reason to believe a theist's mind is going to be changed. This isn't a debate that somebody's going to say, oh, you're right. God, I see what you mean. God does exist, or God doesn't exist. I don't expect that. What I think the true purpose is that you are basically, you might have a question, you might have a doubt, and you are peer testing your ideas.
Yeah. And also it's for the benefit of the audience. There might be...
It's for your benefit. I have an idea.
Yeah.
I say, well, because it's, I think these groups sort of resolve a doubt. Even if I'm for some, I mean, we're looking for something else. We're not looking for I don't think it's realistic for me to think, well, I'm going to be convincing people to leave their God. I don't even want to, because that God, if I take this from them, something has to replace it, or I'm damaging this person.
Mm.
They have this structure in their lives, and if I remove these pieces, what happens to, what happens to them, what happens to the rest? So I don't want to, I don't want anybody to go through a process that isn't organic, that doesn't stem from them, to change their mindset.
Exactly.
But I realized that I was doing it simply to gain some clarity on other things, putting, and so I'm getting into these debates. And sometimes you'll get a question of, well, are you absolutely sure a God? How can you know? Are you absolutely sure a God doesn't exist? And I'll say, yes, I am absolutely sure a God doesn't exist. Until I have some kind of proof that a God could exist.
Yeah.
No, I'm absolutely certain, 100% certain, because if a God with no proof doing things that I conceive as being physically impossible, it is an impossibility for the that big flood, that rain.
Yeah.
There's no way that much water, where did it come from? And where did it go?
There isn't that much water in existence. They did the calculations.
Well, there might be that much water in existence, but it isn't here. And it wouldn't travel to space to get here. And then when we travel, then when it leave, there'd be no reason for it to leave. It would have to overcome gravity.
This forces them to go into these Yeah, but the planet wasn't. Yes, there wasn't back then. The planet looked differently. There might have been like higher mountains, and I'm like, shut the fuck up. Just sit down and shut the
We
fuck up.
know when these things happen. We know when they created, the Mount Everest and all this. It's
Yeah, no, I mean, and this is the thing that I have a problem with, is that you have to, now that we've learned about science and how the world works and how everything is coming together, in order for you to still hold on to those religious beliefs, you need to do some serious tap dancing. You need to do some tap dancing, and either one of the two has to give, because they are not compatible. They're not compatible. Our understanding of how the world works now and the knowledge that we've gained through this scientific process of inquiry is incompatible with that book and those beliefs. So you've got to do one of two things. You have to say, um, it's a metaphor. It's just a story. God was too dumb to write the book right the first time. I don't know. Or the second thing is that one of the two has to give. And usually the people who believe very strongly, they say science is wrong, God is right, and that causes so many problems, because people who can justify letting go of reasoning and their reasoning faculties in order to make the story believable and true, they're the same kind of people that will commit atrocities in the name of their religion. They will take for example, just look at 50% of the population, how some women are treated in religion. Second class citizens. They don't get the right to decide what happens over their own body. It's incredible what religion can
that's
get.
the cause of religion. Before
Yeah.
religion, there were just gods, which were an explanation, like there was a god of thunder, because
Yeah.
you see a bolt, you see a flash. Consider primitive people. Very hunter-gatherers. This is before civilization. And you see a bolt of lightning. You see a tree next to you explode into flame, and then you hear this big bang.
Yeah.
And well, how do things travel? Because you see this flash of lights coming from the sky, and it's coming down to the. Well, it's how do things move that way?
Yeah.
Well, when they're thrown. So somebody up there threw that light.
Yeah.
It must be a god up there, because we're all down here. And then there must be a god of fire that set that tree on fire. And then there must be a god of sound that created that big boom afterwards. Now, you and I will say, no, that was a bolt of lightning that hit a tree. The bolt of lightning is like 40,000 degrees. The tree starts to burn at 500. So, of course, it bursts into fire. And then that boom you heard is the air that the bolt of lightning has heated expanding. That's the sound you're hearing. But that primitive guy doesn't know that. All he's thinking of, there must be somebody up there that threw that bolt of lightning, the god of thunder.
Yeah.
It stays that way until we get civilization.
Yeah.
And then
the thing is also the that reaction of lightning hitting the tree is so violent. The god must be angry.
Yes, exactly. So now they're getting characteristics. They're getting human characteristics. This guy is selfish. This guy, is kind. Pray to this one. But now, to get civilization, and see, it goes hand in hand. People think, well, because I was very curious, how did misogyny start? Because it's sort of like religion. It's everywhere. How did we get to this situation that 50% of the population is second-class citizens for all intents and purposes? They have absolutely no control. That if you leave the house, it's from your father to your husband. There's like no other way. Otherwise, you're always under control of some guy. Even here in the United States, my mom gets divorced in 1976. In the 60s, a woman could not get like a credit card or something. I mean, the law, I didn't know. I didn't know. But then I find out my mom, when she gets divorced, she says, I don't have any credit. I've worked my whole life and I don't have any credit. I was on your dad's credit because they said, do you want two cards? You want a card for your wife? And I said, fine. And it has her name on it, but it's his account. So she doesn't have a credit history. And this is in the 60s, in the 70s. So we have a complete that women had to fight for a right to vote, you know, for example. And so I said, well, why? How did this get started? So, well, where we first start to see it is with civilization. And if everybody, the hunter-gatherer societies, everybody's equal, because the only person that might have more say is the oldest person who says, well, you know what? During this drought, I remember there was water over there because I was alive for the last drought. So let's go this way. So that might be the leader. He knows which way to go. That's it. But that's all he's doing. He doesn't have any special, you know, he is rewarded for that. He's just the leader. Yeah. But once they say, hey, we can farm, we're going to stay in one place. And you can only, your wealth is the only way you can carry on your back, because they're hunter-gatherers, they're wandering around looking for food. It's the only way you can carry on your back. But once you get a stable food source, which was farming, and now we are in one place, you can start to accumulate wealth. So let's say you have a farmer, but that who's going to be doing the farming? It's the strongest, it's physical labor. I mean, they didn't have accountants. Well, they did, but very few people could be accountants, because very few people had even understood what a number was. There was no education. So who's going to be pushing that plow? What makes sense is that the strongest person is going to be pushing that plow, you know, doing that kind of labor. If there's a blacksmith, well, a stronger blacksmith is going to do a lot better than a weaker blacksmith. So who are the stronger people? Men. So who's receiving the money? Men. So they are accumulating this wealth. Great. Now the next step. Those guys want to leave their labor, their money to their kids. How do they know who is their kid? So they start putting controls on women to assure it's their kid. No DNA testing, so we have to make sure. And that's where I think is that's my opinion, the origins of misogyny.
Yeah. And it's strange how, we identify these one areas, like, for example, misogyny, for example, the treatment of, xenophobia, for example, as well, where people are scared of outsiders. And all of these things are very strongly justified in texts like the Quran, like texts like the Bible. And, they have very strong foundations in there. I wonder if the societies were like this before they had this religious influence. Maybe it's part of our evolution. Maybe it's something.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because
those were the youth that survived.
We have fear, because if I encounter a stranger, is it a friendly stranger or an aggressive stranger? And it's not like there's laws. It's not like some policeman is going to stop him from beating my brains out. It's like our most basic fears come out, and there's no reason not to have them. This isn't abnormal. We are humans with characteristics. Fear is a big one. And same as an animal. Like I might go, if a dog's afraid, I might be going to pet it, but it's going to bite me. So I don't have an aggressive action, but it's misinterpreting because we're not communicating. Well, it's the same thing with people.
True.
If I'm absolutely by myself with my young children and wife, and there is absolutely nobody around, and I'm in an area that I'm not familiar with. I'm in a foreign city. And for whatever reason, we find ourselves after dark, it's after 12, everybody's gone. But then I see a group of men walking toward me. It's me, my spouse, and my 3 children. But now I see a group of 5 men walking toward me. Do I continue walking toward them, or do I cross the street?
Across the street.
So that's common. Okay. So right there, they have not done anything aggressively. They're walking down the street the same as I am. But we both, from different cultures, both say, yeah, cross the street, because we are aware. So this is common human, response. People do not realize we are where we are because we are afraid. We are afraid of the world, and we are afraid of each other. If you are different, now I'm really afraid.
Yeah.
Because if you're different in how you look, you can be different in how you think. And you're different from me. I'm going to have to adapt to these differences kind of mindset. I think you add this extra layer, or humans tend to add this extra layer, and I think we need to remove it. Matter of fact, I wrote something, excuse me a second, and I'm going to say it, at the way humans separate themselves. Give me a quick second. Okay. So, race, color, sex, national origin. Now let's understand national origin. There is an imaginary line on the ground, and that we are assuming somebody standing on the other side of this imaginary line, and I won't say the ground, I'll say the sand, because that imaginary line can shift, is different than me.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what it's saying. That's what a border is. The person on the other side of this imaginary line in the sand, because it can shift, I might have to take a step back because it's shifted, is different than me. That is what a national border is. And how ridiculous when we put it that way. But it's true. You can't deny it. That's exactly what it is. Gender, marital status, family status, financial status, disability, genetic information, sexual orientation. These are all ways that we don't see each other. This is a way of saying this is different. You are different than me because of this. Religion.
Yeah.
Looking at religion. Don't believe in a God, that's an atheist. Believe in a God, that's a theist. Believe in a certain God, that's a religion. Believe in a certain God in a certain way, that's a denomination. All these are different separations that we create just using religion, which is that real?
Yeah, it's such a good
artificial way of separating us. And are we supposed to be separated?
Yeah.
Are we as humans supposed to be separated?
It's such a perfect tool for dividing and segregating people. It goes against every single humanistic instinct that I have in me. It's strange, because it forces me to suspend my disbelief. It forces me to believe things that I know are not true on such empty grounds. I'm told to have faith. It's true if you believe it's true. What utter nonsense is this? And then on top of that, the church has the gall to insist upon extracting my hard-earned money from me to sustain itself, and then to perpetrate this. And there's only one other thing on the planet that behaves like that. It's a virus. A virus is the only other organism on this planet that goes and infects an organism with the sole purpose to destroy the organism. There's no other organism that does that. And in this process of destroying the organism that it infects, it will also die in that same process. So if you look at it from a big picture perspective,
you're looking at the virus from the point of view of the host. But as
yes,
far as the virus is concerned, it's oh, I found what I needed, and like anything else, it doesn't know it's going to die.
yeah,
I mean, it's not killing itself; it's killed the host, and it needs the host to live. So, but it didn't. It just lived. That's its natural life because it can't move to another host. Or I guess that easily. I'd have to give more research to viruses. But what it sees is, I have a life, or I want to have a life. I found a host. Great. I can live here till the end of my life. Because nothing's going to live forever. The virus is going to die sooner or later anyway. There are a bunch of viruses that didn't find a host and died. Right? So that virus, it did what it's supposed to do, and it doesn't know it's bad. The same way we don't know we're bad, per se, it doesn't know it's bad. If it is indeed bad. And we're certainly bad for some things. I mean, we're certainly bad for a ton of other species that we're wiping out with our behaviors. It didn't have to be now. I mean, in other centuries, we'd hunt buffalo till their, extinction, or dodo birds, or, whatever. I see it as the same thing.
Yeah. So, what was you mentioned earlier that your family were religious to a certain extent. What was the fallout zone like? Because usually when family members discover that somebody is not towing the line, it causes a bit of friction. How did your family react to this non-believing Aldo in their midst?
Well, there wasn't really much of a change. I mean, there wasn't a change. My dad didn't say one word. My mom, I guess, took the priest's word, and that was sort of like the end of that. That he said, yeah, he lost his religion. He doesn't believe. And I guess she wasn't going to get into a battle about it. And then I left home like the next year, so there wasn't. And my brother felt like I did. I think maybe even more so. I never did talk to him about it that much because neither one of us were, like believers. I went to Spain, which is more Catholic than Italy, and it was I'm thinking back, this is like 50 years ago, but you would see, and there'd be stores for it. I mean, women dressed in black if they were widows.
Right.
If you were a widow, they'd be dressed in black the rest of their lives. And I say, damn, because their husband died.
Yeah.
And then I recall this. I knew this girl, her dad died. She had to dress in black for a year. So, but because she was just a daughter, then she could go back to dressing, normally, or clothes with colors. So I think it was, of course, it was a dictatorship. It was when I get there, Franco's there, and it's a very powerful tool, used, or that's how I viewed it. There was a very powerful tool of control. All these people were like so really Catholic, and I said, well, if you can go there, you can easily go with the dictator because it's sort of the same thing. Somebody telling you, and you don't have any recourse, telling you this is the way it is, and there's no recourse. And I remember things like on the front page of the paper, they'd always have something about Franco, and it was like a miracle because he'd be hitting, well, Franco, and this guy is ancient. I mean, this guy was in his 80s or 90s or something. And they say, well, Franco caught, and it was like this 25-pound, like fish or something. Or Franco shot a 70 in golf, kind of thing. It'd be on the front page. It'd be a little clip on the front page of the paper saying, and I'm thinking, even me, back then, it's not something I think about, and I'm looking at a picture of this old guy that almost has to be held up. He's like this frail old guy. And I said, no friggin' way this guy could hit a 70. It's like he would have to hit it like 10 times to get it to the hole, to get it on the green. He doesn't have the strength to do it. And so that's when you're able to well, let me view this situation. What exactly are you telling me, that this old guy can do these, miraculous things? It's not happening, and everything he does is perfect. He went out and he caught this enormous fish. He goes out and plays. What else is he going to? So it's like this whole, and I'm talking to guys, grown guys who've grown up their whole lives with him, and you can't say a word. They thought he was going to resurrect. That's what they said. He dies in 77, and there was in 1980 or something, he was going to resurrect. People actually went to the cemetery. They say he's going to resurrect. They actually believe that. There was a group of,
and this is after being dead for 3 years, he's going to resurrect.
Right. I don't know how they set the date or whatever. It might have been 3 years. It might have been less, but what was in my mind was how can adults actually say this, to the press or live or even create this? How can, and it was almost like I bet 10% of Spaniards believe that.
Yeah.
They might not have gone to see it because it wasn't like a humongous, like 5,000, like on the mount or whatever there at the cemetery. But I bet there were people who couldn't get there that believed it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because if you can believe Jesus did it, why not Franco?
Exactly. But Catholics love their miracles, eh? They love their miracles. And, I've read stories about, every church has a piece of the cross, and every church has one of the nails that was driven in the cross. And every church has got a piece of incorruptible flesh somewhere stored in a sacrosanct area. It's crazy how these things, and you mentioned earlier the what was it, the miracle of Fatima or something. Yeah. It's crazy how these things that are you cannot examine them, you cannot scrutinize them. So you have to take hearsay accounts, and it's considered, if you insist on doing scientific tests on a relic, it's a big deal, because now you have to get permission from the Pope and whatever to touch the holy relics and everything. So it's crazy how it builds this. It's almost like a bubble of confirmation bias around itself, where everything that it says is done to reinforce a lie and just to keep the lie propped up. And it's crazy. You have to be outside of it to see it, because when you're in there, these things are amazing. They're amazing experiences, and everybody around you believes the same thing. They confirm the same thing. The priest is a person in a position of authority, and all the priest is doing is telling you, like, this is the way that it is. So it's it's a difficult system to break out of. It's so interesting and fascinating to speak to people who are on the other side of this journey, who have gone through it, because it teaches us so much about ourselves. It teaches us how to look at these things with a very critical eye, and I find it extremely fascinating. I don't know if that is the same case for you. What I wanted to also mention is just we always talk about the negative impact that religion has on people, how it causes them to live these lives in in fear and, constantly doubting everything that they do. But since, making that decision that I'm not, going to be influenced by this religion anymore, a lot of people mention that there are positive aspects to their life. They, for example, become more tolerant. They become, more compassionate towards other people. And have you noticed any specific areas of personal growth in your life that that you can maybe talk about? And then after that, we're going to have to cut it short. I'm afraid we've got a scheduled power cut coming up in the next 5 minutes. So, yeah, I just want to make sure that we finish up in good time before the power cuts out.
Well, see, my view was, okay, well, this would be a hindrance to how I live my life. At the very least, it would occupy time that I'd have to read the Bible. I'd have to, go to church, and I'd have to accept a morality that isn't mine, which I just haven't. So really, the only impediment it gives me is dealing with other people that are theistic or religious. I'd say that's the only thing that impacts me. That well, you can't get an abortion. And say, well, it's their life, And say, well, it's the infant's life. And say, okay, well, when does this life start? I mean, if the Bible says life begins with the first breath, well, that's birth. So that it hasn't begun. That life hasn't begun. So why isn't abortion, viable, kind of thing? And it's because, well, it would be a life. I said, yeah, but it isn't now.
Yeah.
God is saying it isn't now. So I think where it becomes legality that's imposed on everybody else, nobody can get an abortion, or that's why I see its limitations and where it needs to be forced. It is difficult to have a conversation directly with a theist because we're speaking two different languages. I'm speaking proof evidence, and they're speaking faith belief. Well, how are we, communicating? Because they distrust. I distrust what they're saying. God said so, and I said, well, I don't believe that, and they're distrusting what I'm saying. And it's proven. This is proven. This is science. I can get the glass of water. I can, and I assure you, it'll boil at 100, degrees centigrade. Get all the water you want, so long as it's pure water. Put a thermometer in it. Any water you want, I promise you, it'll boil at 100. And it becomes difficult for them to accept that I can show you that, but I can't show them. There's very little I can really show them online. I say, you have to believe this, or you can research it yourself, but I know this to be true. And they're just sort of arguing back. And I said, you're lost because you can't accept a new idea, or it's like talking to a brick wall. But, my faith is sooner or later, you're going to have that doubt in your mind. And that's really all you need is for to create that doubt. That's really all, because that doubt then forces thinking.
Yeah.
That doubt then forces thinking.
Indeed. And doubt is, I consider being having doubts as being, the religious, they don't like doubt, but I think doubt is a virtue. Doubt is it's a virtuous thing because it forces you to be authentic, and to look for the authenticity of things. To question the authenticity of things is the first step to gaining wisdom and insight. So Aldo, I want to thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with us, for being so incredibly generous with your time and sharing your experience with us. Thank you again very much. And if ever you need to connect with anybody here in Africa, or you want to collaborate on anything, please feel free to reach out to us. We have a community of atheists going over here. And please also on Instant Messenger, you can send me any links if you've got any channels or things that you want to promote, and I'll put it in the description of this YouTube video for our audience to have a look at. Again, thank you so much for your time, and keep
My
fighting.
pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Keep fighting the good fight.
Likewise.